"You're no longer a member of this family," my dad declared at Thanksgiving dinner. "Pay back plus interest," I told them. Weeks later, my house was break-in. I'm 29. Thanksgiving has always been about family, gathering together, sharing meals, and counting our blessings. But that year, Thanksgiving became the day my life fell apart. The whole mess actually started about a month earlier, when my family suddenly came crawling back for help after my brother Ryan got himself into some serious debt. I remember sitting in my car outside my parents' house that day, white-knuckling the steering wheel and seriously contemplating just turning around and driving away. But with a heavy sigh, I dragged myself to the front door. My mother yanked it open before I could even knock, looking like she hadn't slept in days. "Jack," she breathed out, relief flooding her face. Come in, come in." The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. Ryan was hunched over on the couch, staring at his feet like they held the secrets of the universe. Dad stood by the dining room table, arms crossed, practically radiating anger. The silence stretched on uncomfortably until I finally broke it. "All right, someone wants to tell me what the hell happened?" Ryan wouldn't even look up. Mom sat next to him, rubbing his back like he was still some little kid who'd scraped his knee on the playground. It was Dad who finally spoke up, his voice dripping with disgust. "Your brother was an idiot. That's what happened." "I didn't mean for it to get this bad," Ryan mumbled, still studying the floor. "How do you accidentally lose 25 grand?" I asked, trying to wrap my head around the number. Ryan let out a shaky breath. "It started small, you know, just a couple hundred here and there. Then I hit it big one time, so I kept going." He finally looked up at me, face ashen. "And then I lost everything." I shook my head in disbelief. "Hold up, you didn't even have 25 grand to lose. Where'd you get that kind of money?" There was a moment of heavy silence before Dad answered, something in his tone making my stomach drop. "He took out a loan." "What kind of loan?" I pressed, though I was pretty sure I already knew the answer. Mom's voice was barely above a whisper. "Not from a bank." The implication hung in the air like a storm cloud. "Jesus Christ," I muttered, pinching the bridge of my nose. "So what, we're talking about some backroom loan shark?" Their silence told me everything I needed to know. "When's this supposed to be paid back?" "End of the week," Dad muttered. I took a slow, deep breath. "And you have nothing?" Mom shook her head, wringing her hands. "We're maxed out on all our cards. We can barely make rent next month." As I stood there absorbing this information, I couldn't help but reflect on the bitter irony. These were the same people who had mocked my life choices and shown me the door without a second thought. Yet here they were, looking at me with desperate eyes, silently pleading for salvation. I had been saving since moving out and had managed to accumulate a decent nest egg, enough to cover about half of Ryan's debt. The rational part of my brain screamed at me to walk away, to let them face the consequences of their actions. They certainly hadn't hesitated to abandon me in my time of need. But when I looked at Ryan, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. This wasn't just about teaching him a lesson anymore. He'd gotten involved with dangerous people who wouldn't hesitate to collect their debt one way or another. "I can cover some of it," I finally said, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. Mom nearly collapsed with relief. Dad just stood there, stone-faced. Ryan kept staring at the floor, shoulders slumped. "About 12 grand, I specified. That's all I can do." Mom grabbed my hand. "Thank you, Jack, thank you so much." I pulled away. "Don't, just make sure this never happens again." I turned to Ryan. "And you're going to pay me back every single cent." He swallowed hard. "I will, I promise." I didn't believe him, but that was tomorrow's problem. For now, I'd done what they needed, bylaid them out of their mess. Part of me hoped, foolishly maybe, that this would change things between us. God, was I wrong. I wired the money that night. Mom nearly burst into tears. Dad managed what might have been a thank you through gritted teeth, though he could barely look me in the eye. Ryan just nodded, still looking like he might throw up. I didn't stick around after that, but I made it crystal clear. This was a loan, not a gift. No one argued. On the drive home, I told myself I'd done the right thing. This wasn't about my parents. It was about keeping my brother safe. As much as I wanted to let them all sink in the mess they'd made, I couldn't stand by and watch Ryan get hurt over something so stupid. A week passed, then two. Then a month, nothing, not a single dollar from Ryan, no calls, no texts, radio silence. I gave him the benefit of the doubt at first, maybe he was getting back on his feet, working things out. But finally, I couldn't take it anymore and called him. He picked up after a few rings. "Hey, Jack, I skipped the small talk. Where's my money?" The pause spoke volumes. I don't have it yet." I clenched my jaw. "You said you'd pay me back." "I will," he said quickly. "I just need more time." "More time?" I scoffed. "It's been a month, Ryan. You haven't even sent me $20. The background noise, what sounded suspiciously like video games, told me everything I needed to know. He wasn't even trying. "You're just screwing around, aren't you?" "No, I'm trying, man." "Save it," I cut him off. "I don't want excuses. I bailaid you out when I didn't have to, and now you're just pretending it never happened." "I'm not pretending anything," he snapped. "Things have been hard, okay?" I laughed bitterly. "Yeah, well, things are going to get a lot harder if you don't start paying me back." Silence. "Whatever, just figure it out." I hung up. I waited another week, hoping that conversation might light a fire under him. Nothing, not even a token payment. Finally, I decided to try my parents. If they'd had money to bail him out before, they could help him pay me back, right? I called Dad, getting straight to the point. "Hey, we need to talk about Ryan's debt." He sighed like I was inconveniencing him. "What about it?" "He hasn't paid me anything, not 1 cent. So." I paused, sure I'd misheard. "What do you mean, so?" "You gave him the money, that was your choice." My grip on the phone tightened. "It wasn't a gift." Dad let out a dry laugh that made my blood boil. "Well, that's your problem. Excuse me." "You chose to help him," he repeated like he was explaining something to a toddler. "That's on you. Don't come crying to us about it." I was so stunned I couldn't speak at first. "Those were your exact words," I finally managed. "Family helps each other." "That's what you told me when you kicked me out. But now that I need help, suddenly that doesn't apply." Pure rage crept up my spine. They'd begged me to come back, begged me to save them. And the moment they got what they wanted, they turned their backs on me. "Got it," I said coldly. "Enjoy your life, Dad." I hung up. I sat there for a long time, staring at my phone, letting the depth of their selfishness really sink in. And that's when I realized something. I wasn't going to let this go, not this time. They thought they could walk all over me, use me, and toss me aside. They were about to find out how wrong they were. My first mistake had been trusting them to pay me back just because we were family. No contract, nothing in writing. But as I sat in my apartment, replaying my father's words over and over, "Deal with your own problems. That's life," an idea started forming. If Ryan wasn't going to pay me back and my parents were going to shrug it off, I needed another way to get my money. Looking through my records, I realized I still had access to all their home utilities that I had set up while living there. Internet, cable, streaming services, all still in my name, all still being paid through my accounts. They had never bothered to change the billing information after kicking me out. It was time to show them exactly what handling your own problems meant. With a few clicks, I systematically canceled everything. Internet access, gone. Cable TV, terminated. Every streaming service, deactivated. Let them figure out how to manage without the modern conveniences they had taken for granted, the ones I had been quietly providing all along. My mother's panicked call the next morning was exactly what I expected. Her attempts to guilt me about my sister's schoolwork needs fell on deaf ears. I calmly explained that since they wanted me to handle my own problems, they could handle theirs, including setting up and paying for their own services. My father's indignant reaction in the background, insisting they didn't need me, only reinforced my decision. I ended the call knowing this was just the beginning. They had no idea what it truly meant to be cut off, but they were about to find out. Little did I know then just how far this situation would escalate, or the chaos that would follow my small act of rebellion. Update 1. Hi everyone, in the last post, the utilities shut down. They didn't speak with me in a week. That's when my phone lit up with a text from Mom. "Family Thanksgiving dinner this Thursday, 4 p.m. Please come." Short, to the point, almost formal, not her usual style at all. But I saw an opportunity. Maybe I could finally get my money back face to face. I spent the drive over rehearsing what I'd say, how I'd handle it. Part of me hoped they'd have Ryan's payment ready as a peace offering. Stupid, looking back on it now. The house looked the same as always. Mom's fall decorations dotting the porch, that ridiculous turkey flag she'd had since I was a kid fluttering by the door. But something felt off the moment I stepped inside. The tension was thick enough to choke on. Mom barely looked at me as she took my coat. Ryan was already at the table, studying his empty plate like it held the secrets of the universe. My younger siblings, Sarah and Mike, sat rigid in their chairs, clearly sensing the storm brewing. Dad was in his usual spot at the head of the table, but his posture was different, almost militant. We got through about 10 minutes of awkward small talk about the weather and Sarah's college classes. Then, just as I was reaching for a dinner roll, Dad set down his fork with deliberate precision. "You're no longer a member of this family." The words hit like a physical blow. My hand froze midair, roll forgotten. For a moment I thought I'd misheard him. The silence that followed was deafening. Mom suddenly became very interested in rearranging her napkin. Sarah and Mike seemed to shrink in their chairs, probably wishing they could disappear entirely. Ryan kept his eyes locked on his plate, but I could see a slight smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. "What?" I finally managed, my voice sounding strange even to my own ears. "What do you mean?" Dad's face was a mask of calm, that dangerous kind of calm that usually preceded an explosion. "You heard me. This is our thanks for your little support." The way he said support made it sound like a curse word. I looked around the table, trying to make eye contact with anyone, but they all avoided my gaze like I was Medusa turned flesh. "You cut everything off," Dad continued, his voice eerily steady. "Family doesn't do that to family." I couldn't help it, I laughed. The sound was harsh, bitter. "Family doesn't do that to family? Are you kidding me right now?" "Watch your tone," Dad warned, but I was beyond caring. "No, let's talk about what family does to family," I said, pushing my plate away. "Let's talk about how Ryan borrowed 12 grand from me and hasn't paid back a single cent. Let's talk about how you all begged for my help when you needed it, then turned your backs the moment I asked for what I was owed." "That was a gift," Ryan muttered, still not looking up. "A gift?" I nearly choked on the word. "In what universe was that a gift? I explicitly said it was a loan. I told you to pay me back." "Family helps each other without expecting anything in return," Mom finally spoke up, her voice quiet but firm. "It's not just about money, Jack. It's about being there for each other." "Being there for each other?" I repeated incredulously. "Where were you when I needed help? Where was this family-first attitude when I got kicked out?" "That was different," Dad cut in. How was it different?" I demanded, my voice rising. "Because it was me asking for help instead of you?" "You're being selfish," Mom said, dabbing at her eyes with her napkin. "If you just supported us, if you forgot about the money and turned everything back on." "Then what?" I interrupted. "Then I'd be family again. That's what this is about. You'll accept me back if I keep paying for everything and forget about the 12 grand I'm owed." "We could move past this," Dad said, his tone suggesting he was being incredibly generous. "We could forgive you." "Forgive me?" The laugh that escaped me was borderline hysterical. "That's rich. You want to forgive me for asking to be paid back money I'm owed, for not wanting to keep paying your bills while you all treat me like an ATM." I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor with a sound that made everyone wince. "Fine, you want to play it this way? Then let's play. I'm not family anymore. Great. Then you can pay me back everything I'm owed like any other creditor. The 12 grand from Ryan plus interest. Every bill I've paid since I moved out. All of it." "You don't have proof of any of that," Ryan sneered, finally looking up. I smiled, and I could tell from their faces it wasn't a pleasant expression. "Don't I? I kept every bill, every receipt. I even have video from when you came begging for money." This last part was a lie, but watching the color drain from Ryan's face made it worth it. "You wouldn't," Mom whispered, horror creeping into her voice. "Try me," I said, my voice hard. "You want to treat me like a stranger? Fine, then I'll treat you like one too. Every penny you owe me with interest, or we can see how this plays out in court." "You're bluffing," Dad said, but I could hear the uncertainty in his voice. I grabbed my jacket from the hall, not even bothering to put it on. Nobody moved to stop me as I headed for the door. Nobody called after me. The only sound was Mom's quiet crying and the scrape of chairs as my siblings tried to make themselves even smaller. I sat in my car for a long moment, hands gripping the steering wheel, letting the reality of what had just happened sink in. I was alone now, really, truly alone. But maybe I had been all along and I was just finally seeing it. Update 2. It had been a week since the Thanksgiving blow-up, and I foolishly thought things might settle down. Maybe they'd realize they were wrong and pay me back. Looking back, I can't believe I was that naive. I remember that day clearly. I'd just finished a brutal shift at work. All I wanted was to crash on my couch and forget about family drama for a while, but the moment I reached my apartment door, I knew something was wrong. The door was slightly ajar, the lock clearly forced. My heart started racing. I always locked my door, always. With trembling hands, I slowly pushed it open. The sight that greeted me made my blood run cold. My apartment had been completely ransacked. Couch cushions were strewn everywhere, drawers had been yanked open and emptied onto the floor, and my electronics, my laptop, TV, even my gaming console were all gone. But it wasn't just the missing items that disturbed me. It was the deliberate nature of the destruction. This wasn't some random burglar looking for quick valuables. This was personal. Standing there amid the chaos, it hit me like a ton of bricks. This was them. My own family had broken into my home. The realization made me physically sick. They must have been looking for the video I'd bluffed about at Thanksgiving, the one that didn't actually exist. But they'd gone far beyond just searching. They'd stolen from me, violated my space, tried to teach me some twisted lesson about defying them. I called the police immediately. The detective arrived and took in the scene, his expression shifting from routine concern to genuine interest when I explained my suspicions. I told him everything: the loan to Ryan, the utilities situation, the Thanksgiving confrontation. When he asked if I wanted to press charges, I didn't hesitate. This had gone far enough. The investigation moved quickly. The police went to my parents' house the next day with a search warrant. I wasn't there, but Mom called me immediately after, practically hysterical. She alternated between rage and attempts at guilt-tripping, insisting it wasn't a big deal and demanding I drop the charges. I refused. They'd crossed a line, and it was time they faced real consequences. The investigation revealed even more than I'd expected. The cops found my TV and laptop at a local pawn shop, sold under Ryan's name. But that wasn't all. During questioning, Ryan finally cracked and admitted something that made my blood boil. There had never been any loan shark. "I made it up," he confessed to the detective. "I knew Jack wouldn't give me the money if he knew I just needed it to pay off some gambling debts. So I made up the story about owing money to dangerous people. I figured he'd feel obligated to help if he thought I was in danger." The confession was recorded and added to the evidence. When I heard it, I felt physically ill. I'd emptied my savings to protect my brother from a threat that didn't exist. He'd manipulated my concern for his safety to get money for his gambling addiction. The case against them was airtight. The pawn shop had security footage of Ryan selling my stuff. They had his confession about lying about the loan shark. They even had text messages between my parents and Ryan planning the break-in, messages about teaching Jack a lesson and finding that video. When it went to court, I didn't attend the hearings. I couldn't bear to see them try to justify what they'd done. My lawyer kept me updated, though. Ryan pleaded guilty, probably hoping for leniency. My parents tried to argue that they didn't know what Ryan was planning, that they just went along to check on me because they were worried. The judge didn't buy it. They all got probation, no jail time, but they now had criminal records. Dad lost his position on the board of his company. Mom had to step down from her church committee. Ryan's gambling problem became public knowledge. Their reputations in the community were shattered. But the real hammer fell when my grandparents found out. I don't know who told them, probably my aunt, who'd always been closer to my grandparents than to my parents. I got a call from my grandfather one evening, and I'd never heard him sound so angry. The real fallout came when my grandparents learned the truth. Their reaction was swift and severe. They cut my parents off completely. No more financial support, no more covering for their mistakes, nothing. My father, who had always relied on their help during tough times, suddenly found himself truly on his own. They even removed my parents from their will, sending shockwaves through the extended family. In an unexpected move, my grandparents reimbursed me for everything. The full $12,000 Ryan had borrowed, plus additional funds to cover legal fees and replace the stolen items. They made it clear this wasn't about helping my parents. It was about supporting the only family member who had shown any integrity throughout this ordeal. That was 6 months ago. Ryan sent me a text last week, some half-hearted apology about being in a bad place and making mistakes. It read like something Mom had forced him to write. I didn't respond. The whole experience taught me something valuable. I'd spent years trying to help people who would never do the same for me. I'd emptied my savings to protect my brother from a threat he'd invented. I'd paid their bills, covered their mistakes, been their safety net. And the moment I asked for anything in return, they turned on me. Well, I'm done. I'm not anyone's savior anymore, not their backup plan, not their ATM. I'm living my life for me now, and if my parents ever get into trouble again, they can handle it themselves. They're not my problem anymore.